Welcome. Once again, series of interviews, and I do my best to tackle all kinds of beyond talented comedians on this show. And I'm your host, Sully, and with me today is Kevin Israel.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, podcast co-host, former lawyer.
Yes, all of that.
Stand-up venue based comedian. Glad to have you on the show. Again, you one hell of a job with your stand-up comedy album, The Struggle Is Real. Play on your name.
Thank you.
It's still streaming on iTunes for those who want to listen. Do you have any other upcoming albums that you're just tempted to craft during this post-COVID time?
You know, I'm working on a lot of new material now. Since I taped the Struggle Is Real back in 2017-ish. Yeah, lots happened. I mean, it's been 4 years since then, and I got married, and I have a kid now, and we bought a house, and so there's a lot that's happened that's worthy of making funny, much to the chagrin of my wife. So, right. So there is a ton to talk about, and I've written a bunch of new material. So I'd say maybe in the next 12 to 24 months, I'm going to look to record some more. It's very different now. Recording albums is, it's not like it was 20 years ago when you'd record an album and you get a CD and you could go sell
Instant feedback.
Yeah, it's you throw it up online and it streams places and you get a tenth of a penny per stream, and you try to sell it and you can't sell it at shows because people don't use CDs anymore. So it's very different, and it's also, once you've created that thing and you've used that material in that thing, then it's kind of like, well, now I have to write more material.
You don't want to revisit it, or I could reopen it and I'll show you a different side of that coin. But
right. So then it's a lot of, it's a lot of pressure. A lot of comics, famously, Louis C.K. talked about it. They write a new hour. I think Seinfeld did it too. They write a new hour every year. George Carlin, I think, was like one of the guys who started it. Every year he would kind of bury his act and start from scratch, which is bananas to think that you're writing an hour of material.
It's past nothing new.
Yeah. So, and look, when you're at that level and you can go play top clubs every night, multiple times a night, and you can just grind out and just beat new material. But for guys at my level, where most of your shows you're being paid to be as funny as possible, it's tough to start working in new material because people are paying you for your best, not for your experimental. So it's do
you think it's easier to like maybe revisit a joke, but then don't go all the way to that next part of the build up, followed by the
or it's a lot of it is, I can pepper stuff in, we'll work little stuff in.
I talk a lot about my Jewish heritage. I talk a lot about my mother. Let me tell you another funny story.
Yeah. It's you find ways to do it, but it's a challenge. And it's scary. It's when you've been doing an act for a long time, and to say, well, now I'm going to do something new. It's scary because you never know how it's going to be received, and you're not sure that your jokes are going to be as funny as they were. And it takes time to hone a joke. It takes a lot of time to and comics will tell you all the time, you're always recrafting a joke. I have jokes that I've been doing for years that I'm still finding new stuff, pauses or words to be added or taken out to make it funnier. So it's a labor of love. And then just to say, well, you were nice, but I'm going to move on to something completely new. It's like jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Oh, what a great joke. There's a joke. Would DB Cooper even attempt that joke? Have you ever stated a joke the wrong way and then you're like, wow, I got a laugh, but I'm too close to it. I knew I said it the wrong way. Maybe I'll start saying it this way. Is it even funnier?
Yeah, you always, there'll always be moments where you find a lot of it's in the pausing. A lot of it's in, what's not said. And sometimes you'll realize, oh my God, if I let the joke breathe, or if I let a part of the buildup breathe, they start laughing before I even say the punchline. Because you've either telegraphed it a little bit or they're anticipating it, which is great. It's great, number one, if it is the punchline. and they anticipate it, because then there's the satisfaction when you say it. They're like, I knew that's what he was going to say. But it's even better if it's a misdirect and they think you're going one way and then you completely switch it on them. That's even better, because you got the laugh from what they thought was going to be said. And then you get the bigger laugh from, defying expectation. So it's, it's like playing around with anything. It's like practicing almost like any sport. You find little new techniques and stuff just by doing it.
So fearlessness and confidence are various factors. You're no stranger to this. Many comedians have noted, stop trying to be funny, just be natural. Say what's on your mind. If you find it funny, eventually someone might also find it funny, but also just decide how you're going to tell it and try to not make it seem staged and just
overstep. I think it's more, you get real hokey about, giving advice to newer comics or just talking about how the craft works. But
some of them get spoiled. I had a Showtime or Netflix special. Fuck you. I'm like, well, you were only funny in that one special. Burn.
Right. But it's less about don't try to be funny, and it's more about just try to be yourself. Just be you. And then
don't be,
if you're being honest to yourself and you're really,
if you want to
every comic has his own delivery and his own tone and his own style. Yeah. And, and it comes through. And so when you're forcing that, the audience really picks it up. But I think you should always try. I mean, the goal is always to be funny, but it's more about finding your voice on stage. And I hate saying that because it's such like a artsy fartsy thing to say, but it's really true. You listen to, if you go to an open mic and listen to 10 new comics, they all sort of have the same way of delivering their joke. And it's this, and I don't know. And sometimes we'll talk about it in like the back of a room about like, why is it, and I couldn't even do it for you. And I know I had it when I started, but it's just this weird cadence, because it's like, da 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 da, and like punchline. And you're not comfortable just talking like yourself, or just, and that just takes time and practice. I was at an open mic night trying out some new material a few weeks ago, and there were a couple new comics on, and I watched it
in New Jersey.
Yeah, in New Jersey.
Okay.
And it's just cringy to watch, because first of all, you feel bad because what they're going through, trying to find this, just get this, they just want to get a laugh. Just let me get one laugh. And then you internalize it, because you're like, I remember doing all of that, and I don't know how I stuck with it, because it's such a painful process. And you're really not, I mean, there's some lucky comics, but you're not good in the sense of being able to, perform regularly and consistently. It takes a few years, and those first couple years, I don't care what anybody says, unless you're just a freak of nature, you suck.
Yeah.
It sucks.
It's cruel.
And it's, the only thing I can compare it to is golf. Like golf, the only reason people like golf is because they don't remember all their shitty strokes. They just remember that one good one that they had each round they go out. And that's how it's starting off in comedy is.
Even when you suck, it's like ping pong. It's like pool table. Is like, it's just comfort food. But yeah, there's a lot of nothing. But you
don't remember. You just want that one perfect shot, or that one perfect,
the hole in one.
And when you get that one laugh, if you ever get that one laugh, you suddenly go, oh, I want more of that. And then you just start, it's like a drug. You just start chasing that one moment, and you try to just keep recreating it. And that's the beauty of honestly, it's the beauty of joke writing. Like, joke writing is the best, worst thing you can imagine, because I'll envision a joke and I'll be like, oh, this is hysterical. And then you get up on stage and you're like, what the fuck am I saying? Why am I saying this? And now you're too far in. Like, I've got to complete this Frankenstein of a statement. But then when it works, I just did a gig 2 weeks ago, and I was the comic I was with. I looked at him and I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm going to tell the audience this story. Just this random story that came to my head. And he's like, you're going to try something new tonight? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I think it's going to work. And I got on stage and I started to do it, and it fucking worked. And I was just like, That's the best feeling in the world when it just it works
You've
perfectly.
got that fearlessness. You didn't have to worry about.
It was just awesome. And also, like, I was new the show I was on. I knew the guy booking me. He wasn't gonna hold it against me if it bombed. So there was a little comfort there. But yeah, it's. I mean, you can ask any comic 10 out of 10. The best feeling is when a joke works for the first time.
Oh,
it's and you're always shocked that no matter how many jokes you've written and how long you've done it, you're always like, oh my God, you're laughing at that? Like, wow.
No one knew it was going to land.
Right.
Are there any open mic venues that would literally let groups of people go on the stage and literally insult each other for laughs? Seems like that'd be a fun time. Because I know there's plenty of people, they can tell stories for hours, just 2 to 3 of them, and they just talk shit about each other. And
I mean, there are like roast battles.
Ooh.
Which isn't my thing.
And you got to take it, and it's a little too much.
Yeah, you know what? It's not actually. I mean, some people can insult me all they want. They won't even bother me. But I don't get off on making somebody else feel bad.
No, like, that's fine too. It's
like and I know there is an enjoyment there from the audience perspective, from the comic perspective, but it's just never my thing. So I've done a couple of roasts of like celebrity style roasts where you're roasting somebody for their birthday or something like that, and it's staged like the Dean Martin type roasts. And I've written some jokes.
Have you ever gone as Dean Martin for Halloween? Looks like you could pull off the look.
No.
Just get that.
Be the first Jewish Dean Martin. I'm closer to Sammy Davis Jr. But yeah, no, I've never seen people there's a couple comics that I know who perform as a pair, as like a duo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting to see, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I've never seen just a group of people get up. I know like the Blue Collar Comedy Tour guys used to, after the whole show, they would get them back on stage and they would just bullshit for a while with the audience. Sometimes the audience would ask questions, or they would just tell random stories, and it'd be fun. But they were also like monsters doing what they do, so it was just amazing to see. But the funny thing about comedy is that, like, you might have this story and you're like, oh, this would be so great to tell on stage. Like, I tell it all the time and it gets such a great laugh. And then you go on stage and you're like, oh, nobody's going to care about this. Like, why am I even saying this? And it's such a different, comics always joke around about, like, there are people that always come up to you after a show, and there's just like a list of things people always say to you after a show. And one of them is always like, hey, everybody says I should do comedy, or like, oh, I thought about doing comedy, or hey, let me tell you a story.
Yeah,
you can use that.
Yeah.
And it's like painful but you always but it's always said with good intention. So you always have to, play along with it and humor them. But it's
have there ever been any distracting audience members where you're like,
oh yeah,
I have to take my glasses off anytime I'm giving a speech. I'm just like, fuck, no one matters. Fuck you all.
Yeah, no, there's distracting just to look at, or like being distracting. There's like that behavior.
Yeah, more like of the aura. Everyone's had this experience where there's just that killjoy, and because they're so not enjoying themselves.
Yeah. And you know what? And
you are stilling all your negative energy, stilling my positive energy is out my fucking heart.
Every comic will. I mean, it's like, this is like, everybody goes through this where you could be in a room murdering, just everybody's dying of laughter, and I will only see the one guy who's sitting like this. And it's like everybody, people could be dying, rolling in the aisles, and you only see the one guy who looks like he just found out his dad died.
Yeah, he just chose to he had got invited by his friend to come over here, and he doesn't do stand up.
Yeah. Or once I did a show years ago, and this couple came in, and the guy was huge. He looked like a murderer, like he was a giant guy. And he sat in the center table, like 4 back from the stage, and he had he was huge, and he had his massive arms folded, and he had a scowl on the whole time, and he didn't laugh. He didn't like some people tell you they don't laugh, but at least they do this. They'll do like the nod, like and you hit the punchline. Like I understand, like at least acknowledge that you were doing something. He didn't move. I remember thinking on stage, like, did I piss this guy? Like, is this guy here to like kill me? Like,
right.
Is this it? And so then when I was done, the next comic had gone on and I went in the back and I think I was there with my wife at that point. She was my girlfriend, and he comes walking in the back, and I was like, and he's walking at me, and I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I'm gonna have to try to fight this guy. Like, I don't know what I did to him. Maybe I hook up with one of his girls way back in the day. Like, I have no idea. And he came back and he looks and he goes, "You are fucking funny." And I was like, what? I was like, I am. And he's like, yeah, man, he's like, we saw you at, and he said some other show that I had done like 6 months ago. And he's like, and then we saw you were going to be down here, and we were down, I think it was in like Ocean City, Maryland. And we were down here. So we were like, let's go see him again. And I was like, wait, you've seen me twice? And he's like, yeah. Right. And I was like,
I needed you?
I was like, I thought you were gonna kill me after that. I was like, you look so angry. He's like, oh yeah, I'm not a big smiler. I don't laugh or smile, but I love comedy. I was like, wow, you and your face should get on the same page, because that's not.
That could be his shtick, where he gets on stage, says funny stuff with a very I want to kill everybody.
Yeah.
So you talk about how you briefly had a political career. You want to go into detail of that? Any Ray Donovan-esque stories having to dig up dirt on people?
Yeah, no, I used to work for elected officials. I was a chief of staff for a couple of state legislators here in New Jersey.
I love it. Coming to Fox this fall, NBC, Israel chief of staff.
Yeah, I worked in politics for about 20 years. I worked on campaigns, and I worked down in Trenton, in the capital of Jersey.
Was that before or after your legal consultant?
I worked in politics right after I worked in politics actually during college, and then right after I graduated, I got a job working in politics. And politics is like, you're almost like a mercenary. Like, you'll work in one job and usually
say one free things everyone wants you to say and put it out there along with the guys who are
but donating. Also every job lasts like 6 months to a year, and then you just move on. And so I worked for like 5 years in politics at like 5 different jobs. And then I decided to go to law school, and I went to law school in 2006, and I graduated in 2009. And then I worked at a law firm for a couple of years, and I didn't like it. And then I went back to politics, and I worked in politics for a number of years after that.
What do you think just prompted your return? Was it just, I'm good at it, I just don't like it, so I'll get over it, I'll make it?
What do you mean?
You were saying you didn't like it and then took a break, then came back to it.
Yeah, no, you know what? I just wanted to, at the time, I was in my like mid to later 20s, and I was like, I got to figure out what I'm doing with my life. And I'd always planned on going to law school. So I just figured, I'll go be a lawyer. I'll make a lot of money doing that. And it was more of like a financial decision, which ironically, it didn't work out to be financially beneficial, because now I'm just saddled with tons of debt. Thank Joe Biden for every little bit that you're trying to do.
Jeez.
But yeah, so I went law school, did the whole lawyer thing, passed the bar, worked at a law firm, didn't like it, and then went back to politics because I was like, I think I like that better. But all the while I was doing comedy. I did stand up. I've been doing stand up since 2001, I think.
Nice. And so, how did Gutting the Sacred Cow come about? Like, how did you and Kevin Goatee cross paths?
So, Kev's a comic too. I knew of him. We knew of each other on social media, and we'd always comment back and forth about movies. He and I are both big movie buffs. And and then I had done a couple podcasts before that were just kind of random, with other comics just bullshitting about whatever. And it's fun, but I was like, there's no format, there's no structure to it, and anybody can get on a mic and just talk about whatever they want. I wanted something a little more structured. So I wasn't doing anything at the time. This was probably around 2019. And
oh wow.
it was about 2019. And Goatee reached out to me, or Goatee posted. He's like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast about movies, about people talking about movies that they love or that they hate that everybody else loves." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's such a great idea." So I reached out to him and I was like, "I'm in if you want it." He was like, "Absolutely."
And plus, you're not roasting it. You're just saying, yeah, I liked it growing up. It has not aged well, or, well, I never
Yeah.
liked this, but now that you had done this sit down or guest here, I think I understand why I don't like it. Because it's pretty much just goes back to the rule of thumb is like everyone knows. They just literally just simple, just thinking to yourself. Here's how I
Yeah.
would describe this. You're just
Yeah.
overthinking it, inserting as many adjectives as you can. That's not doing anything for anybody. That's not you. Like you said,
Right.
it goes back to comedy. Be you.
Right. Right. Right.
Uh,
Right.
Now you'll love this. You famously, or shall we say infamously, roasted the original Highlander. You'll be delighted to know the original show, which you're a fan of, is coming to Blu-ray. You joked at the end of the episode that everyone should see the uncut French versions. Well, that's exactly what they got. The French versions will be coming to Blu-ray, so generation will be able to see all the detail, so to speak.
That's great. Yeah. So I mean, it was Kevin's idea, but in all, the full evolution, I'm not on the podcast anymore. I I had I had a baby in last December,
Oh wow.
and between baby and comedy, and I do have a day job, so my wife was just like, something's got to give, and so unfortunately it was the podcast. I had to step down, and it was a tough decision because I love Goatee and I love Gutting the Sacred Cow. It's such a great concept.
Fine. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
How long you been married?
I've been married 4 years. Will be 4 years the end of this month.
I wish you the best.
It's going great. I've known her for 12 years.
Even better. Don't go in blind. So before I let you go, do you have any other just movies or shows that were like a big cultural inspiration to you growing up that in many ways you would sometimes try and work in a joke about, or just that movie or show or even a book spoke to you and
Oh
just
my
realized
God.
this was so close to your persona? I know what I'm going to ask Cody. It's going to be Back to the Future, Star Wars.
I mean, like Ghostbusters is my favorite movie of all time.
Oh, so there you go.
I saw it opening weekend in the theater when I was 8. My sister took me to see it.
Have you been to a bunch of horror conventions or hung out with comedians or similar kind of cult celebs?
What's that?
Have you ever hung out with similar cult celebs of kind of those kinds of movies, or been to a convention?
No, I've been to different like horror conventions and comic. I was a big comic book geek growing up. So I go to like Comic Cons and stuff, but I've never hung out with any of those guys. But yeah, I mean, Ghostbusters was, it was one of the first movies that I saw that I was like, I was scared. I mean, I was 8 and I was scared, and it was, it was 1984, and at that time that was cutting edge special effects. So I was scared, but at the same time I was laughing, and I remember thinking, how is something scary and funny? I remember like putting that thought in my head, like that they could do that, and that was talent. And to this day, it's still, it's still amazing that they were able to pull that movie off the way they did at the time they did. So that was, I always liked the funny, and I always and look for the humor and stuff. So, that was a huge kind of pivotal moment for me where I was like, because then I'm a sci-fi guy, I'm a horror guy, and I'm comedy, and that movie put it all together. So for me, that was like, that was a watershed moment.
Totally. It's been a string of many movies getting reboots and sequels. Are you sequeled out right by now? Are you looking for new material? Or are there still some movies or shows you legit want to see revisited, but no one's brought to the table yet?
The only movie that I really want the only movie that I want to see that remade, that the original almost doesn't even count, is Masters of the Universe. I was a huge Masters of the Universe kid growing up. I'm a staple product of the 80s. Like everything that happened in the 80s, I loved. And I remember watching the first episode of He-Man when I was, I think, 6. Nice. And I still have a collection of them. And I think there's like, especially now with all the Marvel movies and Star Wars and everything doing so well, I think you could really do a cool Masters of the Universe, a little darker and grittier. Everyone likes everything gritty. Masters of the Universe kind of sword and sorcery type movie. There's definitely an opportunity there. Kevin Smith tried rebooting the cartoon, and it was pretty cool. But I really would love to see a live action Masters of the Universe movie done right. That's maybe PG-13, maybe even R, something with some violence and some real adult themes to it.
If you had the chance, would you like to do a voiceover for one of the characters? Let's say they had CGI characters in there, and
of course. Of course.
Have you tried doing some voice acting gigs?
No, you know what? I never did. Goatee did some voice acting. I've thought about it. Because I read a lot of audiobooks, and so I always love listening to the narrators, and they there's some really great narrators out there who can do 100 different accents in a book and keep all the accents correct for every character. And I think it's just amazing. And I don't know that I could do that, but it's something I've always
cast for our audio drama.
Right. But I in sticking with the theme of I do too much already, I just haven't had a chance at the time to dive into it.
Okay, very cool. Wait it out. Yeah. What comedy clubs are really always pretty lively state to state, would you say right now?
The best club in New Jersey is probably Stress Factory, which is in New Brunswick. It's a huge national club. And it's owned by a comedian. So it's one of the best room in New Jersey, if not in the tri-state area. In the city, one of the best clubs is probably Gotham. Gotham Comedy Club it's high class. They put on great shows. And then, I mean, there's tons of comedy clubs out there, and I support people going to any club supporting comedy in any way, because between the pandemic and everything, we're still kind of climbing out of it, and audiences are starting to trickle back in, but we could always use more. So whatever your local comedy club is, schedule a night, Friday night, Saturday night, go and enjoy the show regardless of who the comedian is.
Again, comedy is unfortunately getting politicized again. You want people to talk about what they want to talk about, and then there's others who want to offend as many people as they can, and then there's others who just don't get the joke, and next thing you know, you're the newest comedian being mocked on Twitter. What do you think are some good safeguards everyone can do to just realize, okay, moving on, this doesn't have to be the next Charlie Sheen type scandal? What do you think would be some good kind of ground rules, your safety pin for just saying,
I honestly, I think it's almost, the famous Supreme Court case about pornography that said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yes.
Any comic knows when they're pushing the line too far. And there's some comics that's just their thing. They push the line, and you're going to get burnt. But when you've gone too far, and when it's hurtful or mean. Dave Chappelle got a lot of flack for going after the trans community over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I think it was justified, because one or two jokes, if you make about anybody, you want to make a Jewish joke, you want to make a black joke, about
gay
joke about special needs people. If it's a good joke, it's a good joke, and people will appreciate it. But it got to the point where Dave Chappelle wasn't writing jokes. He was writing like a stump speech against the trans community. Mm-hmm. And it was like his last special, it just felt like, all right, like, just be fun. Like, man, you don't have to tell me anymore. Like, all right, you did it. You did your thing. You still have your fans. Just be funny again.
It seems like every satirist falls out of line or gets too grumpy. There was moments where Jon Stewart was being kind of a dick to one reporter.
Oh yeah. And
look, chill, guys.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what your political alignment is. But the golden rule in comedy across the board, whatever you're talking about, just be funny.
And now they're joking, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to cancel me? I'm like, see, it's not even funny anymore. We're already past canceling.
Yeah.
This is like,
yeah, well, the whole cancel thing, that's, we could talk an hour about, and then there's
cancel,
Yeah.
Boycott, usually it's a activist kind of thing. Hey, this type of cheese color gave everyone an allergic reaction. Okay, let's boycott it.
Look, and it's also, like when Louis C.K. was whipping his dick out to women who were just trying to get like a job or a better gig or whatever it was they were trying to do. Like, yeah, he deserved to get shit for that. And he deserved, he deserved to take his lumps. Like that's justified. But when somebody tells a joke, like Shane Gillis, who was supposed to be on SNL, and he told a joke that I think he did like an Asian impression or something on a podcast that he had done like years before. And, the internet went, the minute they announced that he was in SNL, the internet went and searched and found that. And they said, oh, we got him. And then he got thrown off SNL. And it's like, come on. Like, he was just being funny. He was being in the moment. Nobody got hurt. It wasn't hateful. Maybe it was a bad joke, and we've all made bad jokes, but you move on.
And half the time, these jokes are recirculated by people who also don't have any double standards. So then it's like, whoa. Aren't you this guy who owns a podcast that talks shit about celebrities on Twitter? Well, why do you care? You're going to get any kind of attention anyway. You're TMZ.
Right.
You're not a reporter.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's a tough line to walk, but for comics, the rule should be funny. Be funny. Bill Burr, there's a famous interview where a woman walked up to him, this was years ago, and said, and I think he thought he was getting a different question. And she walked up and she said, can women be funny? And he was like, and he kind of snapped at her a little bit, but then he like actually seriously answered the question. And he goes, just be undeniable. If you're undeniably funny, nobody can say anything about you. Nobody can say. That's why like Louis C.K. was able to come back from it, because he's fucking funny. He's a great joke writer. He's a great storyteller. And if you're just that funny, nobody's going to be, whether you're a woman, whether you're trans, whether you're black, whatever you are, if you're just that funny, you're gonna be able to push through. And so that should be the goal for comics. Just be that funny. Be as funny as you can. And if your goal is to be funny, then you're probably not going to burn yourself. But if your goal is to just push the envelope, if your goal is just to see, can I get away with this? Right. Then you're probably going to get burnt.
You took the cat out of the bag, and then now you literally have nothing else to show except, you went a little too far. Now you got interesting, but it wasn't necessarily for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say to those who pretty much base their career on another comedian? Because again, people are going to be inspired. It's the same thing with film and books. Like, hey, I want to write a script that's similar. I grew up watching James Cameron. I want to make a James Cameron type movie. Hey, I grew up watching, in this case, Richard Pryor and George Carlin, so I want to be like them. Nowadays, everyone's trying to be, again, like Kevin Hart, all these other big mainstream comedians. And then there's others trying to be like less known, but still big on Comedy Central, like Keegan-Michael Key, Kristen Shaw, Nikki Glazer's a good example.
Yeah, look, if somebody's going to inspire you to do it, that's great. Look, I can't really say this anymore, but Bill Cosby was the first stand-up comic I saw. I think I was like 9, and I saw him on a show called Saturday Night Gold, I think it was called.
You were doing 15, I think you said, and then just went from there.
Yeah, and I I never said, I want to be Bill Cosby. Thankfully, I never said that, because I didn't have his access to prescriptions. But that motivated me in the back of my head. And it took years and years and years for it to finally come out. But that motivated me to be a stand-up comic. Now, I didn't go out and say, I want to be just like him. Now, I do like his storytelling style. I think it's amazing that you can just sit down and tell a story and it's funny. And it's not necessarily a joke the way we know a joke, the formula of a joke. And that's what I try to do on stage, is tell stories. But if you're gonna set out and be like, I want to be them, then it's gonna be like anything else you try to do when you try to emulate somebody else. It's gonna probably be a failure, because people either see through it, or you're not gonna be as good as that person because you're not them. And comedy, more than any other art form, is about being true to yourself and about being, the audience knows. So if you're motivated by somebody to say, I want to try to do that in my own way, that's great. But if you go out and saying that I'm going to be the next Kevin Hart, or I'm going to, that's not the way to go about it. Go out and be the best, Kevin Israel that you can be, because you were inspired by.
You are making a brand. Don't just be, hey, I'm a lookalike of this fellow comedian, because I've seen others who were doing that too. They were doing impressions of other people, and then they ran out of material there. So a lot of the Mad TV guys got pretty cynical after a while, like especially with Frank Caliendo and Ari Spears. They pretty much just went to hey, I'm just going to mock people, because now
Yeah.
done the impressions of 5 people for way too long, and it's not funny
Right.
anymore.
John Madden's only funny for so long.
You bring up just so many good points on, when you do the podcast on nostalgia and everything, and it seems like people are just now getting comfortable talking about what they love. And for a while, it just seemed like they kind of weren't really doing that unless it was like a review show. How can people just kind of just be comfortable in their skin doing whatever they're doing? Because it seems like many will just go through life without actually asking the important question: what am I happy? Do I love what I do?
Wow, that's a deep question, man.
If
I had the answer to that, I could write a book and make $1 billion. It's
Israel book.
yeah, honestly, people will always say like, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. That's bullshit. People doing what they love still feel like they're working, and people doing what they love still have shitty days at work. But I think what everybody should have is doing something that they love, whether or not it's their job. Find something that you like to do and always keep that with you, whether it's stand-up comedy or whether it's, writing just for the hell of it, or whether it's, golf, whatever little thing you like to do, always have something else. Because if you're not doing something for you that's just for you, you just get lost in all that other stuff that you're doing just to get by. And you're not living for you. So yeah, maybe I'm not going to be a super famous millionaire comedian, but I'm never going to stop doing it because that's what I love and that's who I am.
You wouldn't
And
want
it's
to do
part
anything else. The day you're asked to do an office job, that's when you already hang it up and count your life savings. Many others I noticed seem to just have trouble with a brand. Like they just get shy or they back down. What are some steps to just ensure that you don't procrastinate too much or overspend month to month? Because there's many who do that and then they're like, I don't know, I'm just not feeling it anymore. They get bored instantly. And it took
you know what I mean
way.
You got it. It's a grind like anything else. Especially stand-up comedy. It's not all jokes. Unfortunately, it's a business. It's what the time you're on stage, the 20 to 40 minutes you're on stage is 5% of stand-up comedy. The rest is writing and practicing and networking and begging for spots and dealing with bookers and social media and all that shit. And it's so much stuff that's outside of the time that you just want to be on stage that, yeah, you got to be willing to put up with it. Like it's not just a bunch of chuckles on stage. It's a business. It's not a nice business either. No. It's an unforgiving business. But if you decide that it's something that you want to do, you got to be ready. You got to realize that it's not, it's not all just coffee shops and, getting up there and just riffing. It's, it's work. It's working with tough, difficult people. It's a challenging industry with a lot of very talented people who are struggling to make it themselves. So you got to be willing to, toughen up and just put your head down and do the work.
Very nice. It seems like there's always been comic reliefs every year, which have been very heartwarming. They were kind of a big thing on HBO with Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal and the great Robin Williams all hosting it. And nowadays I see them every now and then airing on something like Comedy Central or HBO. Are there any groups you'd like to get involved with that have a similar formula where you do some comedy and to raise funds for a charity or a nonprofit?
The one thing that I really want to do before, if I ever hang up my comedy hat, I want to perform for the troops.
Very cool.
I think that would just be awesome. And I think, they're out there just, my nephew is in the Army. And it's just such an unforgiving, thankless job.
Kudos to your nephew's bravery.
Yeah, no, he's an amazing guy. He's stationed in Alaska, and he's on like the front line. Like if shit happens in the Pacific, he's one of the guys who goes
on a battleship.
So yeah, it's crazy. But so I think the ability to get I never served, and it's actually something I regret. So the ability to go and just give those guys a little something, it would be awesome. And I've talked to some bookers about doing it, but it's the time commitment, especially now with the way my life is, it just hasn't worked out. But it's definitely something I'm going to do at some point.
Okay, very neat.
Yeah.
Have you also thought of performing for other just big, important people, like maybe firefighters or
I do. Half of my work is fundraisers for PBAs, fire departments, EMTs,
nice.
schools. I mean, most of a comic's money comes from some kind of fundraising work.
Even a Jewish heritage festival?
Oh yeah, I've done synagogues, I've done Jewish groups. I mean,
Nice.
If there's an organization out there, I've probably performed for them.
Okay, very cool. This has been an absolute delight. And
yeah, this is fun. Thank you.
Anything else you just want to promote that's
just
out?
check out my album. Hopefully there's another one coming soon. The struggle is real. Go to my website, kevinisrael.com for my dates. It was
quite a guffaw, and you can tell the audience was just really digging that one.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a good time. So yeah, so thanks for having me, and keep supporting live comedy.
Yeah, let's ensure that it is still a thing. Okay.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a jacked up